Hello. Today, I thought I would look at the albums I own from the band Coldplay. Coldplay are touring here in New Zealand at the end of this year, or towards the end of the year at least. I will not be attending. They're playing at a stadium. The biggest, is it the biggest stadium? I think it's the biggest stadium in our country. It's called Eden Park, which is in Auckland. And it's primarily a rugby stadium. Well, they play cricket in the summer there as well. But I think the Auckland City Council gave consent for 6 music acts per year to play. So, for example, Billy Joel's played there, the Guns N' Roses played there, Pink played there, a few other people have played there. But anyway, Coldplay are playing there. Well, Coldplay are maybe you say a divisive band. They kind of fall into no. I was going to say they fall into the Nickelback category, but I wouldn't say that's true because as much as a lot of people don't like Coldplay, they have actually received quite a lot of critical acclaim at different periods of their career. I was actually reading through one of the articles of these albums last night, and one of the albums was voted by quite a few critics and publications as one of the greatest albums of the 21st century, and that kind of surprised me on one hand, but on the other hand, it didn't surprise me. Whereas Nickelback, excuse me, Nickelback doesn't receive the same kind of critical acclaim. They have that kind of hatred, as well as a lot of people like them, but you know what I mean. But they don't win over the critics in any way whatsoever. But anyway, let's see what I have. I've got Parachutes, which is the first album they released back in, what would have been, 2000? Yeah, 2000. I remember when this came out. I remember all the hype around them. And in my memory, it was not an overnight thing. It was kind of like a slow burn throughout 2000 and 2001. At least here in New Zealand. Now this was secondhand. All of the ones I'm going to show you today are secondhand because Coldplay, actually I have owned one Coldplay album new. I'll talk about that. It was about 15 years ago, but all the ones I have today are all secondhand and were priced between 50 cents and $1. This one was 50 cents because I remember the shop I bought this at on a Saturday morning about 4 years ago. The condition is very good. May I say excellent. Can't see any scratches on there. And the case itself is in pretty good condition as well. The booklet doesn't seem to be damaged in any way. So Parachutes came out and it's down here in New Zealand was pretty huge, and I assume it was the same certainly in England and UK and different parts of the world. So here we have the track listing. The first song I ever heard from them was Yellow, which I guess would be the same for most people because that was kind of their breakout single. But the other singles that were on this were Don't Panic, Shiver, Trouble. And was Parachutes ever released as a single? It may have been. There they are, all looking away from the camera. Turn around, lads. Oh, there they are, you can see. So, can't actually remember all their names. I know Chris Martin's the singer and Will Champion is the drummer. I always mix up these two. One's called Guy Berryman and the other one's called Johnny Buckland, I think. But I'm not sure who's the bassist and who's the guitarist. I think Berryman is the guitarist. Let's see if we can see this. Guy Berryman, okay, John Buckland. Doesn't actually say who does what though, does it? Produced by Ken Nelson. The album is for Sarah Champion. Sarah Champion is Will Champion, the drummer's mother, and she passed away, I think, in the year before this came out, or just maybe a few months before it came out. She was actually, all of the guys from Coldplay kind of come from upper middle class families. And if you read, well, I haven't read about extensively all of them, but if you kind of flick through, they all come from quite academic families. I think a lot of or at least, was it Chris Martin? I think Chris Martin's grandfather was the mayor of Exeter at one stage, and his father, I can't remember. They're not like super rich, but wealthy enough to send their kids to what the English call public school, which is actually private. The expensive schools, the kind of elite schools in the UK, they call public school, like Eton and Harrow, and those are the famous ones. There's lots and lots of other ones I don't know the names of, but where Will Champion, the drummer, his mum and dad, I think, were both academics, like university professors, and his mum passed away quite young, sadly. Anyway, musically, it's how would you call it? I liked the first album. When it came out, I liked it. I really liked the song Don't Panic. I did like Yellow, but I've heard that song just so many times that it's kind of, you get a bit sick of it. Shiver, I like. Got a very Jeff Buckley-esque quality to that song, and a little bit his voice. Chris Martin does kind of like falsetto, kind of high-pitched vocal in that song, and there's something about it that's always remind me of Jeff Buckley, that song. Trouble, I did like that song the first time I heard it, but again, like Yellow, it's been played and overused and kind of used as background music for sad events to such an extent that I quite strongly dislike that song now, Trouble. We've got Parachutes, High Speed, We Never Change, Everything's Not Lost. I really like the song Parachutes. High Speed's okay as well. Overall, it's a good, solid, what would you even really class it as? Alternative, I wouldn't say alternative rock, because it's kind of very piano-centric, isn't it? I think it's just a good album, without even having to categorize it necessarily. I think it stands up quite strongly after all this time. It's an album that I can put on and listen to all the way through, except maybe wanted to skip Trouble. It's an excellent debut album, and I can understand why it did what it did. Kind of seemed so huge. I saw them live around this time. I saw them, would have been the end of 2000. No, very, very early 2001, before Rush of Blood to the Head came out. They played at the Big Day Out Festival in the summer down here in New Zealand. They played on the same bill as Limp Bizkit. I remember. Who else was on that bill? Limp Bizkit, Coldplay, maybe Rammstein. Maybe, I think it was Rammstein. Or was it the Chili Peppers? No, the Chili Peppers was the year before. I don't know. There was a couple other big bands as well. Foo Fighters were on as well, I think. Anyway, I saw them. I wasn't that blown away with their live stuff. I think kind of don't really have much memory of it. I remember thinking it sounded a lot like the recorded version. They were able to pull that off live, even in a festival setting where you're playing, to a huge kind of stadium area, with the sound might be a little bit muddy, and there's sounds coming from different stages around the festival grounds. It's still, they had a pretty solid, crystal clear sound that sounded like really almost as good as the recorded version. So, strong debut album, and that always leaves the problem of the follow-up, the sophomore effort, as the cliche goes. And their sophomore effort was pretty darn good. This album here, A Rush of Blood to the Head, which came out in mid-2001. No, sorry, 2002. Came out in mid-2002. I've been listening to this album a lot recently, and I don't actually know why. If you look at it, it really is. And again, some of the songs on this suffer from the same problem as Parachutes, is that they were played so much on radio and TV and in just around the place that you grew a bit sick of them. Particularly the song In My Place, The Scientist, and Clocks, which were three of the four. I think there was four or five singles, but those three were certainly singles. In My Place, I still can't listen to it. I don't enjoy that song. The Scientist, I like that song, even though it's been overplayed so much. I can appreciate that song. And Clocks, I can appreciate it, but I would rather not listen to it, just because I think one of the TV channels here used it as like their station ID music about 20 years ago, around 2002, 2003. So, when they'd say tonight on channel blah blah, it would be the piano from Clocks. But as for the rest of the album, Politic, I like that. I remember the first time I ever heard that, they played that on the student radio station. Would have been back, I guess, around 2002. And the first time I heard it, I thought, that's an interesting song. Apparently he wrote that the day after 9/11, the day or the 1 or 2 days after 9/11, as kind of a reaction to that monumental event. In My Place, I talked about. Now, God Put a Smile on Your Face was also a single. I have some strange connection to that song. And as I often do, I kind of, what's the word? I'm going to go off on a tangent, and I'll try not to too much. But so that song came out in 2002, and the first time I heard it, I quite liked it. It's quite a. Apparently, that one of the themes of this album the band had as they were writing was urgency, and some of the songs have a certain urgency. And I guess the easiest one to identify as urgent is the piano riff of Clocks. That's quite an urgent sound. I think Politics got a bit of an urgent sound as well, but God Put a Smile on Your Face as well has got an urgency to it, especially in the chorus. The verse, not so much. The verse has kind of got a darkness to it, especially that kind of guitar line. So I like that song a lot. I don't know that I absolutely love it or anything, but I liked it. Then I had a relationship breakup, shall we say. It would have been about 2004. Yeah, 2004. And it was kind of the first proper relation breakup that I'd ever experienced. I was in my young 20s. You had girlfriends before that, you break up, but it's not as big. But me and my ex-girlfriend's lives were quite intertwined. Quite a tumultuous and passionate relationship in both the positive and negative sense. And it came to an end on her, she wanted to end it. And I don't even know really how to describe it. It was quite a difficult period of my life. However, I got through it and actually came out the other side a lot stronger, but I'll talk about that. I don't need to talk about that. How it connects to the song is and up to that point in my life, not to sound over dramatic, but when you're at that age, like I had friends who had died and grandparents who had died, and that's obviously very sad. But death at that age is kind of external to yourself, in that you're so young and your mind is not yet fully formed to grasp the concept of death being a part of your existence. Like, of course, intellectually you understand that, but deeply emotionally, maybe you can't. You kind of have that invincibility that you have as a young person, which is so liberating, but at the same time, one of the reasons why young people die at higher rates than other age groups, because you think you're invincible. And so when someone dies, even I had like quite close friends die in my late teen years. And it was really sad. I experienced deep grief, but it wasn't the same existential sadness that I felt with the breakup of this relationship. And so when music is a big part of my life, and I listen to music a lot, but I found that when I experienced this intense negative emotion of the breakup of the relationship, I couldn't listen to music. Well, I couldn't listen to a lot of music. The music at that time I was into was a lot of Swedish death metal, like kind of melodic death metal, Gothenburg sound, Swedish death metal, At the Gates, In Flames, those kinds of bands. So a lot of doom metal. I was listening to a lot of Opeth and a lot of Catatonia. If you listen to especially Catatonia, it's very bleak, dark music. And I just could not handle that at that time. I was so low emotionally that if I listened to something like Catatonia or death metal, it would have could have pushed me over the edge. No, don't mean in that way, but it certainly would not have helped me. What I found is that there was certain kinds of music that I could listen to. And one of those songs was that song, God Put a Smile on Your Face. It's got nothing to do with it lyrically. I've never really listened or listened to the lyrics in that way before. I've never really thought about those lyrics. It was just the music as a whole was like soothing. It was like medicine. The other, and so speaking of Nickelback before, I remember, this is very embarrassing talking about this, but I remember driving home the night where it was kind of completely over, and we were living together, and I left our shared residence. And I was actually having to work after that, so I was leaving my job, but then having to drive to another part of the city to the new place I was going to be living. I was like, I could admit I was crying while driving, and the song on the radio was the Nickelback song, Too Bad. If you haven't listened to it, it's a good song. I still actually like that song. But that was the right song for me at that time. A song that kind of, I don't know, helped me. And I don't even mean help like, it made me overcome, because it took months to get over it, maybe even longer. But at that moment, to get me through that minute, that song was helpful. So, God Put a Smile on Your Face by Coldplay. Too Bad by Nickelback. My Immortal by Evanescence, that was another one. Really quite, these aren't songs that you kind of advertise that you like, are they? They're kind of embarrassing songs. But it's interesting what music hits at what times in your life. Anyway, what I've realized over the last few days at this is the second half of this album is really good. Particularly like Daylight, Green Eyes, A Whisper, and Amsterdam. Really like the song Amsterdam. Next up, X and Y, which came out around 2005-06. The sticker's covering the year. You can see I got this for $1 2 years ago, roughly. Pretty sure this came out in 2005. And again, I remember this being played a lot on radio, TV, and being a kind of a big deal in the music press at the time. I can never find a bloody date when you're looking for it, can you? 2005, which is there. I didn't listen to this album anywhere as much as the previous two. Parachutes and Rush of the Blood to the Head I listened to and quite familiar with. But this one, even now, after I first listened to it, 19 years ago, and having listened to it off and on since then, I still don't feel that's familiar with it, and I don't feel it's as good as the previous two albums. It received pretty good reviews at the time and it sold very well, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just kind of it passes you by a little bit. Certain things come around at the right time, and then you get older and you kind of miss the second half of the things. I like the song. I like Square One. It's a good starter. I like Speed of Sound and A Message. I don't like Fix You, which again suffers from the same problem as the big single on the other ones. It was just played to death. I think they played it on, if you've ever seen the Ricky Gervais sitcom Derek, it's not really a sitcom, TV show Derek, at the end of the one where he meets, I shouldn't spoil it if you haven't seen it. There's an emotional part at the end of one of the seasons. I can't remember if it was the last season or the first season where he meets someone and they play that song, I'm pretty sure. And it was almost too on the nose, too kind of appealing to the schmaltzy side of emotion. But yeah, overall, it's not. I'm not saying it's a bad album at all. And the copy I've got here is in excellent condition. You see a lot of Coldplay albums in the secondhand shop, so it's not hard to find stuff in good condition from them because they sold like which one was it? This one sold 17 million copies worldwide, and it went 5 times platinum in New Zealand. It went, I think, 10 times platinum in Australia or something. Some crazy number. So that's X and Y. Then we get to this one. And by this stage, I'd kind of checked out of the, this is 2008, I checked out of the Coldplay universe. I wasn't following them really at all. Around that time, 2005, 2006, it happened with a lot of music. Because I went overseas, you kind of disconnect a bit from broader Western culture, I guess, you know. You're not around the media of your country, like the TV and the radio. And I know nowadays TV and radio aren't really part of people's lives anyway, but I noticed I kind of like a different holes in my life where I was out of the country, living in non-Western countries, and you kind of like miss bits and pieces. You're like, oh, I can't remember this being a big thing, but for everyone else, it was a big thing. I don't know how big this was, but again, very good condition. And what do we see there? They used that famous painting. Don't know who did that. Who did do that? It's of the French Revolution, isn't it? She's meant to represent liberty, fraternity. What's the third one? Libertad. I can't remember. So this album had a certain aesthetic about it, didn't it? If you remember in the videos and their live performances, they wore these kind of like not costumes in that sense, but kind of certain clothes that they would wear throughout the whole touring cycle. Produced by Eno, which you can rarely hear in some of the songs. Very Eno-esque pieces before some of the, like before Violet Hill, especially the first kind of 30 seconds to a minute before that is kind of just an ambient synth bed, and then it kind of before it gets into the vocals and guitar part. But this is not a bad album. Seems to be a kind of a tradition. There is some songs on it I don't like, particularly the song the one that shares the same title, the Viva la Vida one, which is the one. I think they were sued for that, weren't they? I don't know if it was successful, but someone said they'd copied their chord progression or whatever of that. Anyway, I don't like that song at all. I think that they've got a pretty good record of good openers for their album. And again, I like Life in Technicolor. It's a good opener. Love is in Japan, Reign of Love. Violet Hill is probably my favorite album. It was the first single off the album, and I like it. It's quite it's got kind of some energy to it. And that's something that kind of you could say that Coldplay suffers from sometimes, is a lack of drive, not a lack of energy to be, exact, but more not an aggression. I don't even really know the word. A drive forward. And they had some of that on Rush of Blood to the Head, but it was kind of been absent through X and Y and some of this album. But I do like Violet Hill, and I do like Strawberry Swing as well. So not a bad album, but progressively I'm becoming less engaged with their music until we get to this next album, which I gotta say I don't really like at all. And I never really found anything. It's definitely the album I've listened to the least. And maybe that's why. But I've just never felt, they kind of, they very clearly they tried to evolve their sound. They said that even with Rush of Blood to the Head, that they didn't want to make a Parachutes 2.0. They didn't want to make this kind of softly piano-driven, piano is the center of the sound album. And so with Rush of Blood to the Head, they tried to kind of move it more in the rock guitar direction. And then afterwards, they kind of, kind of almost have a kind of popish, incorporating electronic sounds as they've gone along. And you can hear that with this. And maybe it's for that reason I don't really like it. There was called Milo Xyloto. Is that, don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Xyloto. Milo Xyloto. The first song off the album, again, that's not a bad song. It's the song the same name as the album. There's another one here that I quite like. Was it Princess of China? So that's what happens. You listen through to albums, but because you're not engaged with it, you don't even really know the song names. Whereas like the first two, I'm so familiar with them that I know the track number and the title of every song. Whereas this one, I've just kind of gone in and out of over the years, and have just nothing's ever really connected enough for me to go, oh, what's the name of that song? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Maybe it's UFO. Regardless. Again, excellent condition. As new. If I bought that new in a shop, I would have thought that was new. The condition really is perfect. And for a fat booklet, it's not damaged at all on the sides, which is very rare. And there's the band there in all their glory. Imagine a band of this size nowadays would put on quite a good show, haven't really aged that much, although this was taken 2011. So really there's only 11 years between Parachutes and this. So it's kind of strange, isn't it? 2011, you kind of think, well, that's around our time now. We're in 2024, which is 13 years. There's more distance between this and today than there is between Parachutes and this. Crazy. I think of this as a recent album by them, but it's not. It's 13 years old. It's crazy. That's where the journey stops for me. I have never listened to a Coldplay album since then. I have heard snippets of songs. Nothing that's made me stop. Some of them I've actually thought, shit, that's Coldplay? Ugh. Like some of them really kind of got like a very pop, kind of modern pop, not bubblegum pop, more like I don't even know really how to explain it. Like Imagine Dragons type music, like that kind of rock pop stuff, just like soulless, overproduced nothing. However, in saying that, I think they've got like 4 or 5 albums they've released since this time. So I might be being a bit unfair, and they might have produced some really good stuff since then. So I'm just quickly typing in their name in Google just to see that they how many albums they have released since then. Whenever you're trying to look at something, it never comes up as soon as you want it to come up. Come on. Coldplay discography. So they've got 9 albums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so they've had 4 since this. And they are Parachutes, rush about to the head, X and Y, Viva la vida, and his, or Death and all his friends, Milo Xyloto. Ghost Stories, never heard it. Head Full of Dreams, never heard it. Everyday Life, never heard it. Music of the Spheres, which was released 3 or 2.5 years ago, have heard that of that. That actually sounds, Music of the Spheres, that makes me want to listen to it. You know, it wasn't that, that's the kind of the same name as that Gustav Holst classical suite, or whatever you want to call it. But look at this. It features guest appearance by Selena Gomez. For fuck's sake. We Are King, don't even know who that is. Jacob Collier, don't know who that is. BTS, who is a K-pop band with like 15 members in it. As well as the electronic producer John Hopkins. I really like John Hopkins, so that's a tick of positivity. But it says here, pop rock, synth pop, space rock, ambient. It's just off the top of it. If someone says, oh, have you heard the new Coldplay album? They've got a guest appearance by Selena Gomez. You know, fucking Justin Bieber's ex-girlfriend, some teenage pop star. It's like, doesn't fill you with hope, does it? And that's kind of something I've noticed about them, is that they, at least Chris Martin, really tried to tie himself to other genre stars. This one here, so the one before that, Everyday Life, there's people, again, there's all sorts of producers I've never heard of before. Did they have any, I can't be looking through that. Fema Kuti, who was that Fela Kuti's kid or wife? Moses Martin, he's a co-writer. That's Chris Martin's son, isn't it? That he had together with Gwyneth Paltrow. Alice Coltrane, she features on one of the album, on one of the songs. That's John Coltrane's wife. She might have passed away since then. Can't actually remember. But yeah, I know he did that song with Kanye West. The what's that song? I've got the piano riff in my head, but I can't think of the name of the song. Do you think about me now? And then that one, I'm Going Home Again, that one. And he did some stuff with Jay-Z. So it seems like he really wants to kind of tie himself to relevance via kind of more accepted stars in the younger kind of world, like fucking BTS. Have you heard BTS's music? You know, when I lived in Korea, I lived there quite a while. And without trying to, you know, stating the obvious too much, K-pop's really popular in Korea. And I mean that as in that maybe I expected there would be more variation of like, yeah, K-pop's popular, but also this is popular and that. But if you talk to young people there and say, what kind of music do you want? 99.99 times out of 100, they'll say K-pop. And I'm not just meaning I mean like teenagers and people in their young 20s, you know, university age students. And so it's just everywhere. And so I tried to listen to some K-pop when I was over there, because I do try to make an effort. If something isn't big or popular, I'll give it a go, because you never know what you're missing. Usually it's not worth it, but I did. And I listened to some of it, and it was just so ridiculously overproduced. Production, you know, I listen to electronic music that is obviously made 100% artificially on a computer or on a synthesizer or whatever else. It's not as though I have something, you have to be playing you know, that's what I used to think when I was a kid. You have to be playing the instruments live, otherwise it's not real music or whatever bullshit. That's not something I believe. And there are lots of pop songs that I like. But just the plasticness of that stuff, of K-pop, of like BTS, for example, makes it really, from my ears, really difficult to listen to. It's quite like an assault, an oral assault. And yeah, I don't actually know what it is about. Anyway, I'm going off on other things here. I've been speaking for 35 minutes. You can hear my voice is going because I've got a slight, or maybe I'm recovering from a slight cold. So anyway, that's Coldplay. That's what I own in the way of Coldplay. 5 albums. I would have spent, let's just say, $4 probably for those 5 albums, which I know I go on about that, but I know I go on about that a lot. But it really is such a great, cheap hobby collectible or collection thing, CDs, secondhand CDs. The fact that I can get half the discography of a pretty major band in the last 20 years, I can get half of their discography on CD, all in excellent condition. Really can't state enough how good the condition is of all these CDs, for about 4 or 5 New Zealand dollars, which is about $3 American. You can't beat that. That really is, like, we talked about this before as well, how I follow a lot of vinyl collecting communities. I don't own any records, but I follow them because there are certain kinds of music that I would like to be able to like, for example, I like a lot of vaporwave and synthwave type music that's put out, and I would really, a lot of time they only sell that on vinyl, and I'd like to collect that stuff because it's made in very low numbers and it's interesting for me, and it's just kind of something, quite a niche thing that I'd like to get into. So I follow a lot of the kind of communities online of those people who collect their stuff, but the prices, it's just, obviously that's a different thing because it is so niche. But even regular records, vinyl, it's astronomical prices. So I feel fortunate that I am able to still have these things and still find them, although it's getting harder to find them. Anyway, this is getting close to 40 minutes and I've been rambling a lot. I hope that has been at least somewhat enjoyable, me spilling my guts about relationship breakdowns and the emotional connection of certain kinds of music. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for watching.